Almost a decade ago, over 150 countries joined the Global Declaration of Commitment to End Sexual Violence in Conflict. They promised to bring perpetrators to justice, to put survivors' needs first, and to take other practical steps to end impunity. We knew these were lofty goals, and there has been some progress, including some prosecutions at the national level, the adoption of the Murad Code, and the establishment of the Global Survivors Fund. But it has not been nearly enough to meet the needs of survivors or to deter perpetrators from using rape as a weapon of war in almost every new conflict in the last decade. We know we are speaking of crimes of extreme brutality, the assault of men and women in front of their families, the gang rape of children. We meet and discuss these horrors and agree that they should never be allowed to happen again. We promise to draw and hold that line. But when it comes to hard choices about how to implement these promises, we run into the same problems time and again. We run into some Security Council members abusing their veto power. We run into economic and political interests being put first. We run into lack of political will. Governments and international efforts come and go. Those who remain, who fight and struggle for decades, are local people, and in this case, survivors of rape and those who work with them. At the last conference in London in 2014, survivors and NGOs came forward with information and solutions for what it would take to end impunity, from reforming militaries to developing local capacity to ensuring medical care, trauma care, livelihood support, and reparations for survivors. Despite all the commitment that governments made, we have not seen significant, lasting action at a global level. To give one practical example, less than 1% of humanitarian relief is spent on preventing or responding to sexual and gender-based violence. Survivors and advocates have highlighted this funding gap for years, and addressing it was one of the priorities, one of the promises of the Global Declaration. The creation of a permanent international body that can help fill the accountability gap has also been discussed for years without any progress. When human beings are physically assaulted in this way, and in some countries for decades, there has to be a decisive global response. When there isn't, it sends a message to both the victim and the perpetrator that we don't truly regard this as a significant crime that has to be punished and prevented. So this conference should, in my view, take a hard look at what has succeeded and what has not. It must not be another moment when survivors come forward to have to explain their pain and suffering again, and to show willingness to working with governments, unless those governments are willing to act on their commitments over the long term and not be deflected and distracted, as is so often what has happened in the past. I think of people like Dr. Mukwege, who works with survivors every single day, under threat of his life, without complaint, for years on end. If leaders globally were willing to be even a fraction as brave and committed as he is, and as survivors are, then we could perhaps finally find a way to meet this crime with the response it deserves.